Today we'll be moving towards Naxal movement, which I had already explained you in the Zoom class, that the term Naxalite comes from a small village that is in West Bengal, which is known as Naxalbari. Okay, from Naxalbari the word called Naxalite comes. There is a section of party which is known as Communist Party of India, Marxists. The leader of this party were Kanu Sanyal and Jungle Santhal, who had really started a great uprising, a great movement in the year 1967. It was on 18th of May, Silgari Kishan Sabha. They also gave us full support for this movement, and they also started adopting the armed revolution just to fight against with the government to redistribute the lands to the landlords. Okay, thereafter I had already explained you of the causes of its rise. Okay, the causes of its rise is very, very important. So please listen it carefully. Now, as I've already explained you in the previous classes, that this movement, the Naxalite movement, okay, the Naxalite movement in India, especially it is a type of a guerrilla movement led by a group of left radical communists who had really got a great motivation from Mao Zedong. Now, Mao Zedong, which I've already explained you, he was the greatest leader of China. Okay, he's from China, Mao Zedong. As you know very well, in China also there is a communist party. Okay, they follow the theory of Marxist. Okay, so similarly this party also, this movement also had got a great inspiration or motivation from Mao Zedong, who had really taken an initiative, who had really started a revolution to overthrow the governmental authority. If you really wanted to achieve the local autonomy, the local freedom, the local government, then that can only be done by violent, not by peaceful means. Okay, so this motivation, the movement called Naxalite movement, got this motivation from Mao Zedong, one of the greatest leader of China. The main causes, okay, the main causes for the starting of this movement was the failure of the Indian government. Okay, let's see what was the failure of the Indian government. The Indian government failed to implement the provision which was there in the 5th and the 9th schedule of the Indian Constitution. Okay, whatever the provision was there written in the 5th and the 9th schedule, okay, 5th and the 9th schedules of the Indian Constitution, the Indian government completely failed to implement these provisions. That is the main cause for the starting of this movement called Naxalite movement. Okay, now I'll just explain you about the 5th schedule. Now, what is there in the 5th schedule? Okay, 5th schedule and the 9th schedule. I've told you the main causes for this movement was non-implementation of the provisions which was included in the 5th and the 9th schedules of the Indian Constitution. Okay, according to the 5th schedule, okay, try to understand. Okay, according to the 5th schedule, it has been clearly written in the Indian Constitution, all the forest reserves and the lands, try to understand, most of the forest areas and the land which has been inhabited by the scheduled tribes. Inhabited by the scheduled tribe means the scheduled tribes, the people who belong to the scheduled tribes were living in that area. Okay, they had settled down in the forest areas as well as in the land. So those areas should be administered by tribal advisory councils independent of the state government. This point has to be noted down. This provisions is there in the 5th schedule. Okay, the forest reserves and the lands where the scheduled tribes were living from the very far years back, they had already inhabited that land, that area should be looked upon. Okay, that area should be looked upon by a council which is known as Tribal Advisory Council. Try to understand, Tribal Advisory Council, to administer the forest area and the land where the scheduled tribes were being inhabited, that were to be administered by Tribal Advisory Council. It is clearly written in the provisions of the 5th schedules of the Indian Constitution. But till now, none of the Indian state, okay, try to understand, none of the Indian state had implemented the tribal advisory council. They had not established, they had not set up the tribal advisory councils. Is it clear? That is number one fault of the Indian state. Though it is there in the provision of the 5th schedule of the Indian constitution, but the Indian state had not till now implemented the tribal advisory council. That is one point. Okay, they are going against the provisions of the Indian constitution. And in the other hand, try to understand, very, very important point that has to be noted down. In the other hand, they passed a law. Okay, a legislation was being passed. Let's see what type of law was being passed by the government. Try to understand. The government passed a law which had given a full power to the pharmaceutical companies. Pharmaceutical companies means the company which will manufacture medical drugs, medicinal drugs. Okay, that is what you call pharmaceutical companies. Now, the government passed a law allowing the companies, the pharmaceutical companies, to use those land, okay, the land which I am talking about, the land which was been inhabited by the scheduled tribes. Try to understand out here, don't get mistaken out here, okay. Now the pharmaceutical companies were been granted the permission by the government by passing a law that they can use up that land to set up the factories. And while they were setting up the factories, they evicted the local tribal population of those areas. That means whoever the tribal people were living in that area, they were legally forced to leave that area and settle down in some way, in some other places. See, this is the greatest mistake made by the government. That means they are completely going, the government itself are going against the provision which is written in the 5th schedule of the Indian constitution. See, in one hand side, none of the Indian state had established or implemented the tribal advisory councils. Okay. In the other hand side, the government is passing a law allowing the pharmaceutical companies to set up the factories on those land by throwing the local tribal population who are living in that area. Number one point, the main cause for the conflict, the main causes for the uprising, number one point. Now, so that was the 5th schedule, okay, that was the 5th schedule. That means from here we can clearly understand that the government is completely, they themselves are going against the provisions mentioned in the Indian constitution. Now, let us go to the 9th schedule. Let's see what does the 9th schedule have and whether the government is following the provision mentioned in the 9th schedule or not. Okay, the 9th schedule of the constitution passed a series of land legislation. Okay, according to the 9th schedule, okay, according to the 9th schedule of the Indian constitution, that schedule has passed a number of land law. Okay, legislation means law. Okay, land legislation. It was observed that there was a concentration of land among a few rich upper castes of the country. See, finally they found out while observing, okay, finally they found out that most of the land was in the hand of the few rich upper caste people only. That means the poor people, the peasants, okay, they were landless. Maximum area of the land was under the hand of some few rich upper castes of our country. It also imposed land ceiling laws which limit the amount of land that a single person can hold. According to the law which has been passed, which has been passed by the 9th schedule, it has been clearly seen, okay, a certain limit has been fixed that what amount of a land that a single person can hold. Like for example, okay, one person can hold only 2 acres of land. Okay, got it? This is just an example I am giving you. Okay, this law was also passed, a land ceiling law once family. Okay, a land ceiling law was been imposed according to which a limited amount of land that a single person can hold. Thereafter, the excess lands were to be requisitioned and redistributed by the government among peasants for the purpose of the cultivation. See, for example, see, one person is, according to the law, this is just an example I am giving you. For example, one person can hold only 3 acres of land. Suppose the law says that, according to the law, one person can hold only 3 acres of land. If this person have 6 acres of land. Suppose, let's say, this is an example I am giving you, which I am telling you the excess lands. The excess land. That means what is the excess land this person is holding? 3 acres, isn't it? That means he is holding 3 acres of land more than according to the law. So, according to that law, it is clearly stated that if this person is holding 6 acres of land, then the remaining land, actually he is supposed to hold only 3 acres of land according to the law. Try to understand, okay? According to the law, he can hold only 3 acres of land. But he had 6 acres of land. That means he had 3 acres more. 3 acres of land he had more. So, this 3 acres of land has to be redistributed among the landless peasants for the purpose of cultivation. This is there in the 9th schedule of the Indian Constitution. Try to understand. This is there in the 9th schedule of the Indian Constitution. If any person hold excess lands, then that has to be redistributed by the government. Government has to take over that, and that excess land has to be redistributed among the peasants so that the peasants can do certain type of cultivation in that land. These provisions were written in the Indian Constitution to protect the landless farmers and the laborers. Try to understand. Why was this provision written in the Constitution? Just to protect the landless farmers and the laborers. Okay, just to protect the interest of the landless farmers and the laborers, these provisions were been written in the Indian Constitution. But remember here, the failure of the government to implement those provisions and raised these classes to revolt. Say, 9th schedule, the provision which was been written in the 9th schedule of the Constitution, the government failed to implement that. The government failed to implement these provisions also. That was the reason why this really made these classes, the laborers, the farmers, very much angry with the government, and they started a revolt against the government. See, these are the two most important causes, the root for the conflict of the movement called Naxalite movement. Is it clear? So, 9th schedule I had already explained you. In 9th schedule, a number of law has been passed. According to that law, okay, it was been seen that maximum land was holded in the hand of very few rich people. So they passed a law. According to the law, a certain amount of land was been fixed, a limited land was been fixed for a single person to hold. And if anyone holds more than that, then the excess land has to be taken up by the government. Is it clear? An official order has to be passed. Okay, and that excess land from that person has to be taken over by the government, and that excess land has to be redistributed among the peasants so that they can do certain agriculture. But this provision which was written in the Indian Constitution was not implemented by the government. Is it clear? The provisions which was there in the 9th schedule was also not implemented by the government. That was the reason why a revolt started against the government. Causes for the rise of Naxalite movement. Very important point to be noted down. This is there in your syllabus. Okay, the Naxalite movement, the causes of its rise is there in the Naxalite movement in your syllabus. It's there, and the questions from this will obviously come in the ISC. So please go through it and please try to understand the main root for the conflict. The main root for the conflict of this movement. You can say it, the failure of the Indian government to implement the provisions of the 5th and the 9th schedules of the Indian Constitution. That was the main cause for the conflict. Okay, now my dear children, I'll be moving towards I will tell you the important leaders of this Naxalite movement. Number one, first is Charu Mazumdar. Okay, Charu Mazumdar, a very important leaders of this Naxal movement of Bengal. Okay, he had really outlined his ideological principles of the Naxalite movement in the 8 monographs. Monographs means it's a certain type of book. Okay, a book with one book, monograph, euta kitab, one book in which he had completely mentioned the ideological principles of Naxalite movement. In this document, in that book, he had really claimed that the Indian government is a bourgeois institution. Bourgeois institution means an institution who had completely failed to administer the country, okay, especially who are very much violent in affair of own country. So this is how the Indian government has been shown in his document, the document which has been written by Charu Mazumdar. He also had given a great call for the Maoist struggle, just to overthrow the Indian state. He said that the peaceful political process would not be able to bring about the necessary changes. See, if we go in a very peaceful manner, then we cannot make any changes out here. Is that clear? Got it? And see, he also stated that, okay, why the peaceful political process has not been able to bring about the necessary changes. He said that because vested interests control the levers of power, regulate the wheels of industry, and had a feudal stronghold over the predominantly agrarian economy. He said that whatever the interests are there, that has been completely controlled by certain power, okay, of feudal, means especially in the medieval Europe, okay, people used to work and fight for a noble man, is it clear, in return of their land. That is called feudal. Feudal means a land system, we call it. Is it clear? So that there will be a stronghold about the agrarian economy. Agrarian economy means agriculture. Is it clear? Then there started an agrarian armed struggle. Agrarian armed struggle is a struggle or a movement started by the peasants. So that was only the way out for this. He said that we have to start an agrarian armed struggle. That is only one way we can solve our problem. And he said that for this purpose, obviously, we had to establish a secret party organization. So his group, the Charu Mazumdar group, wanted the total appropriation of lands and other property of big jotedars, disarming of the little weapons, establishment of the people's government, and annihilation of jotedars through armed rebellion. See, he clearly said that what we wanted, what we wanted is total appropriation of land and other property. The land and other property should be totally appropriated, okay, from the big jotedars. Jotedar means jamindars. Their little weapons has to be disarmed, okay. The little weapons means the weapons which may cause death, okay. The weapons which may cause death, that has to be disarmed, and the people's government has to be established. People's government has to be established. That means the government, when it has been formed, that government should look after for the welfare of the people. So that type of government has to be established, and annihilation of the jotedars through armed revelation. Then only one way we can completely destroy the jamindars. Annihilation means to destroy completely. Is it clear? Annihilation of the jotedars. Jotedars mean jamindars. So if you want to destroy the jotedars completely, then only one way is there, that is armed revolution. Is it clear? Carry the weapon, go shoot them, kill them, destroy them, then only we can just find some solution. This was Charu Mazumdar group. Then another group was there of Kanu Sanyal group. Kanu Sanyal group, they were in a very patient way. They wanted to go in the patient way. Charu Mazumdar group in a very violent way. Kanu Sanyal group wanted to wait and see the results of the seizure of the lands, and they only would think of armed rebellion. See, they said that Kanu Sanyal group says that, okay, we will see. Let's see what the government will take the step. Whether the government will seize the land. Okay, what will be the result of the seizure of the land? Seizure of the land means to just confiscate that land, to landless seize gonu. Is that clear? So after that, the result of the seizure of the land, then only we will think of armed rebellion. This was the thinking of Kanu Sanyal group. Whereas Charu Mazumdar group wanted total armed revolution. We have to take up our armed revolution. Kanu Sanyal group, have a patience. Just wait it and let's see the result. So finally, in 1967, both the groups came to an agreement. This both group, Charu Mazumdar group and the Kanu Chanel group. Okay, they came to an agreement in which the peasants were asked to seize the lands of the Jotedars. Then finally these two groups sat together. They had a long discussions. Charu Mazumdar group and the Kanu Chanel group, they finally came to an agreement. They had a discussion, they made an agreement, and they asked all the peasants, peasants here means the farmers, okay, they asked all the peasants to seize the land of the Jamindars. This is only the one option now. Finally these two groups came together, they came to an agreement, then they asked all the peasants to take up the lands of the Jamindars. Is it clear? Okay. Next, I am moving towards to the main leaders of this movement. Charu Mazumdar, which I have already told you, born in the year 1918 in Siliguri, that is in North Bengal. His father himself was a freedom fighter. He was been thrown out from the college in 1938. He dropped out the college. He left college in 1938. Finally, in 1946, he went and joined the movement called Tebaga movement. After he was been dropped out of college in 1938, he went and first joined Indian National Congress, try to understand, because this was only the most popular political party in India during the time. Okay, the moment he was been dropped out in college in 1938, he joined Indian National Congress and he tried to organize Biri workers. Biri means a certain type of it's like a smoke, okay, which is made up of leaves. Biri, you know very well, okay. He wanted to organize, he wanted to make the Biri workers stronger. Later on, he left Congress, okay. He didn't like the objectives or the policy of the Congress. He left Congress and thereafter he joined Communist Party of India, CPI we call it. He joined CPI and he wanted to work for the peasants' farm. He wanted to work for the betterment of the peasants, okay. Okay, my dear children, I'll end up my class out here today. In our next class, we'll start with the government measures against the movement. In that class also, I'll tell some important point of some of the leaders, okay, of this movement. Okay, thank you very much.